Hello and welcome to Life.EV. This is episode number 34, a podcast that dives into exploring values. I'm your host, Ajit Panicker. I lead an air conditioning company, Nova, and PureBlue, a tech startup in the air conditioning domain. Join us every Saturday at 11 a.m. for conversations that go beyond business growth, focusing on the values that fuel it. Let's embark on a journey to uncover our true purpose and how we can grow by enriching our lives. Welcome to Life.EV, where we explore values in life and business. And as always, I have with me Vivek Asrani. Hi, Vivek. How are you doing?
Hey Ajit, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Absolutely good, Vivek. For some of you who are joining us for the first time, Vivek Asrani is the driving force behind Kamo Fastener Company, a trailblazing company in the industrial fastener sector. What sets Vivek apart is his deep engagement with the exploration of values. It's been almost 4 years he has dedicatedly penned his reflection on this topic every week. These insightful thoughts are accessible on his website, vivekasrani.com. Vivek's also authored the book One Day at a Time Reflections from Times of Silence, which further delves into his journey and insights. This thought provoking read is available on Amazon and also on his website, offering readers a chance to engage with his profound understanding of values and their role in both personal and professional lives. In episode number 34, we are delving into the risk of being judgmental. Vivek, let's hear your reflections on this.
So Ajit, very often our judgmental nature is our critical nature. We get judgmental when we have a kind of either negative or critical view on something. Now, this is very different from making a judgment call about something because we've thought it through and we need to decide something. So this reflection really is about being judgmental in a slightly more critical manner. So we have to be aware that first of all, being judgmental sometimes is being critical. The second aspect of it is that we need to understand what is behind a behavior. Very often, when we know the story behind the behavior that we see, our anger often turns to empathy. Our misunderstanding or our critical nature turns to a lot of care and concern. And we often stand either corrected or we see things in a different light just because we understand what's behind the behavior. So I think understanding that is very important. The third is just like we uh, need to see what is behind somebody else's behavior, we also need to examine ourselves, introspect, and see what is behind our judgmental attitude. What are some of the deep rooted and deep seated prejudices, um, biases that we live with? Some of them we could have grown up with, some of them we could have been influenced by people around us, some of it we could just be living with because we read so much about it, hear it constantly around us, and we may not have really thought about it carefully to see whether we want to live with those filters and paradigms or they're just coming in the way of us looking at things objectively. The fourth aspect of being judgmental is people from different backgrounds. Very often we come across and we interact with them with a certain, again, like I said earlier, filter in our mind, and that inhibits us and prevents us from building strong relationships because we've already made up our mind that, oh, if this person is from this background, then this is how that person will be. So generalizations, Ajit, I have found, whether it be in business or in my personal life, can be extremely detrimental in building strong bridges. I remember in the early years when we started doing business with many of the Asian countries, and this was about 15, 20 years ago, when China was still developing as a strong supply source. And there were a lot of stories coming out of China where they would show you one sample, but the consignment would be very different. And So I do remember lots of people asking me that, hey, you're doing business with China, how is it? And I remember saying that, look, we've been very lucky that we have some very good suppliers, but there are good people everywhere in the world. So just because a particular supplier is of a certain background or of a certain nationality doesn't mean that they're all going to behave in the same way. So I think that's very important, that different backgrounds shouldn't make us judgmental. The other aspect, Ajit, of being judgmental is remembering that preferences create differences. And our preference could come out of just a habit or something we prefer rather than a value system. But very often we confuse a preference with the value system and we reject the person, or we become judgmental about the person because the person has a preference which is different from ours. So also recognizing whether something is coming from a value system or whether something is just coming from a preference is extremely important. And like I said, if we have to know the story behind what the behavior is, we have to also learn to be honest with ourselves. And when we are truly honest with ourselves, Ajit, the one conclusion we will reach is that the only person we can be judgmental about is ourselves. That before looking out of the window, we need to look into the mirror.
Great. But they say that, when you empathy plays a very big role when it comes to building this whole risk of being judgmental. What are your thoughts on that? And how do you cultivate that empathy to make sure you don't, risk of having these judgmental attitudes?
In personal life, Ajit, and as well as in our business lives, I think empathy and compassion is highly underrated and not fully understood as to how powerful it can be, and why it's extremely important for us to inculcate that in our lives and in our organizations. And I think uh, I'll respond to your question with a story, which is one of my favorite stories from Stephen Covey's book, Seven Habits, where he talks about this man who's traveling in the train with his two children. And clearly, the kids are jumping around, shouting, screaming, making noise. And the passengers in the compartment were getting visibly upset with their behavior. And this man was just, staring down at the floor, not even telling the kids anything, not doing anything about it. All the other passengers were getting very irritated. And it reached a point where the person sitting next to this man couldn't hold back. And he said, look, I'm sorry, but your children are making a racket over here. They are troubling some of the other passengers, and you just don't seem to care. The man was furious. Like, you better do something about your kids. So this man looks up from the floor. He says, oh, I'm so sorry. I guess they just don't know how to handle themselves right now. uh, they've just lost their mother yesterday, and we've just come back from the cemetery. We just buried the mother, so they're just dealing with their emotions. And suddenly, that man's anger turned to a lot of compassion and empathy, and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. What can I do to help you?" So sometimes what we see on the face of it is not necessarily reflective of what is going on behind. And I think that, Ajit, is where, if we interact with people in our organizations, whether it be our team members, our customers, our suppliers, only at what I would say level one, we may have good relationships, but we also run the risk, right, of breakdowns. But if we take the trouble to go to level two, just get to know them a little better, just understand what is the thinking behind the behavior. Just spend, and I'll give you an example of one of the biggest mistakes I made. We had a dealer who had sold 100 of our machines to a customer, and he lost money because that customer went bankrupt, and he didn't pay the dealer. So I'd gone to visit the dealer, and he's told me, he said, we've supplied 100 machines to this customer, and we lost all the money because he didn't pay us. Now, as a brand, I needed to have been a little more empathetic towards the dealer's situation. Clearly, it was the dealer's customer. We had no role to play in the commercials. If the transaction had gone through, then the profit would have been his. The transaction went south, so the loss is also his, right? That's business. Now, at that point of time, I came from the filter of, well, yeah, okay, I mean, things happen. And I made the mistake of telling that dealer, yeah, these things happen. Now, the dealer was actually emotionally very upset because for him, that loss meant a lot more than I had understood. He got so upset with me and he stopped dealing with us. Until date, we don't have his business. And later on, when I did try speaking with him, he said, I was trying to share my problem with you and hoping that as a brand, you will support me in some way. And you just turned around in a very casual way to say, yeah, these things happen in life. Let's move on. That's not the answer he was looking for. And I was not being empathetic at that point of time. So I think empathy is extremely important for us to build in our personal and professional lives.
Since you spoke about the organization, in terms of organizational building as entrepreneurs, one of the places where we run the risk of being judgmental is when it comes to hiring. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, don't we bring up biases when we come to hiring and then end up at hiring the wrong talent or losing a good talent? Have you ever had such thoughts around this?
So let me give you a positive example, but stemming from the same principle. I clearly remember the year was 2001. We just set up a new office in Mahalakshmi. We were all of 4 employees in that office at that point of time. Uh, we needed help. I had sent shout out letters and put them up on notice boards in various colleges. And this very smart girl from HR college. I don't even know why we put up letters in HR college, because I never in my wildest dream thought that somebody from that college would uh, join our organization at that point of time. I mean, we were tiny, means really, really small. So again, it just shows my bias and being judgmental about, well, nobody from there is going to come and work with me, right? They're all going to look at bigger, better organizations. Anyway, so she walked in, and I clearly remember when she walked in, and from where I would sit, I could see the main door. So I could, with a glass partition in my cabin. So my first thought, Ajit, and I still very clearly remember that, and I still joke about that very often. The moment she walked in, I said to myself, okay, there's no way she's going to work. This really well dressed, smart. And when she came and spoke with me, articulate, and I immediately said, okay, she's not going to work with us, right? There's no way. Right? She'll want a big organization and she'll want a better job somewhere. Long story short, it's been 23 years. Mikita is very much still part of our system, anchors our entire quality management system, has pretty much built all the process flows and trainings in the organization. And I was completely wrong. I just saw very smart, well educated young woman, and my judgment was that she won't work with me. And I was pleasantly surprised. And then I had 2 senior managers I hired, and they were good. I went for one person's wedding, I went for his son's naming ceremony, and of course, then he leaves me and joins competition and pulls 14 sales guys with him. And my judgment at that point of time was that, okay, this guy's going to be with us for life, right? Unless he changes industry, because we've built a strong bond. And I was completely wrong. So I was pleasantly surprised in one way, and I was completely uh, taken aback in another context. So I think it's difficult when it comes to being absolutely accurate. But I would say this: the one thing that's really helped me over the years, learning from both examples and from several others, is taking the trouble to get to know our people, to get to know the person behind the manager, and to get to know the background behind the person who is behind being the manager has helped tremendously, because it's allowed us to shape some of our policies, it's allowed us to be a little more flexible in some things, and it's also allowed me to be at some level a little more human in some of my dealings. A little, I wouldn't say the accountability and expectations have gone down, because that would be uh, being unfair to the business, but it has definitely, I would say, Ajit, helped me retain people, build stronger teams, and I think build better relationships with people at the workplace.
Amazing. I must just share something with you. And this is, as entrepreneurs, when we do a lot of work, our biggest thing that comes on our mind is, payments. Will I get paid on time? Will the guy pay on time? And I must share this little experience that I had. We had signed up a very big order. Everything was just going fine. And then usually the payment term was you get it done and then get paid, get it done, get it paid. And it was a long project. Halfway through, I happened to meet a friend and I was just saying, hey, listen, we've got this project and this is what is happening. And he said that, hey, listen, be careful. I've had a bad experience. They're bad paymasters. And that just got into my head. And then after that, I started becoming extremely careful, and I started insisting on money coming across, and it kind of created a stress. The customer was also getting uncomfortable. I was getting worked up till the project got over. Everything happened, left a little bit of bitterness, but we just went through and we passed off. And after a few months, I met the guy and I said, he asked me, how did the project go? I said, it's okay. It was a little stressful, but it all went through. And then he said, this is the customer, right? And I said, no, that's not the customer. It's a similar kind of a name of the customer. He was referring to someone else, and
Oh
I'm
God.
referring, and I'm thinking, what an error of judgmental. Yeah? I mean, what an error of judgment. Why did it not strike me to just give it a second thought rather than just taking it on its face value?
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
just so biased with these things that what's at the top of our mind kind of just completely plays it. And I said there was no need for it. Everything went just fine. Why did I go through that whole stress? Have you had such kind of scenarios happening with you?
Yeah. From what you said, Ajit, the one thing that comes to mind, and I've learned this the hard way, very often as business leaders, we see people the way we want to see them and not the way they are. And very often we get taken in by what they say rather than the way they behave. And I think the moment we go beyond the words and, well, in a way, judge or evaluate people on their behavior and stop looking at them the way I want them to be versus, listen, what am I really seeing over here? And I've made this mistake. A lot of non-performers, a lot of people who should, with whom I should have had maybe difficult and deeper conversations much earlier than I did, was because of this. Exactly because of this, that I wasn't seeing them for what they were. I was seeing them for what I wanted them to be.
Okay. All right. So that's the time that we have for this topic on the risk of being judgmental. Well, it was thought provoking, but fun talking about it. I'm sure lots of us have our own experiences around this because this is something that we all go through. But use this episode to share with your friends, colleagues, and family and ask them, what do you think? Spark a conversation and see where this leads. And we love to hear from you too. Join the dialogue on our social media platforms. Share your questions, your learnings, and the insights gained from this episode. It's through these shared experiences and perspectives that we all grow and learn. So don't hesitate to reach out and contribute to this ongoing conversation. Your voice matters in shaping a more ethically driven business world. Well, that's what time we have for today. Join us next week again for another enriching episode on Life.EV, where we continue our exploration into the fascinating world of exploring values in our lives. Vivek, as usual, thank you for these valuable contributions you make every week. And we look forward to diving deeper into these discussions next week on Saturday at 11 a.m. Do remember, share it with your friends and get a conversation going on life exploring values. Thank you, Vivek. See you next Saturday.
Pleasure, Ajit. See you next Saturday. Bye.
Bye.